Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor, and today we are going to be talking about my 2026 TBR. This is going to be a very chill, modest type selection of a TBR. I don't think that made any sense. However, all of the books we are going to be choosing today are going to be on my bookshelf that I have at home. However, I know that I'm probably going to be adding to this TBR throughout the year if I get a library card, if there's any books I pick up throughout the year at a bookstore. But yeah, we'll just talk a little bit about the books that I have read / am reading this year, and then we'll get into kind of the selection. So let's crack open a cold one and let's get started. Alright, so we are currently sitting in front of our bookshelf. We do have 4 shelves here, and so it's just kind of a little more of like a modest collection, but as you can see, some of our books are stacked, so we do have that going for us. I would say that I've probably read about 80% of the books on this shelf, as some of these are my husband's books. We have a lot of more like academic leaning books, some kind of history books on that shelf there, so haven't read a lot of his history books, but I would say I've probably read about 85-90% of the books on this bookshelf. But to get into the actual books I'll be choosing from this bookshelf, my physical TBR, I probably won't be grabbing any of the books from this shelf down here. We have a lot of thicker classics on this shelf, like Les Miserables. We have Great Expectations, we have the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm not really looking to get into any books like that this year. I went through a massive classics phase in 2020 and 2021, especially during the height of lockdown and the pandemic. I was reading a lot of Jane Austen. I pretty much read this entire book. I actually think I might have read the entire. There's like six novels in this book, I think, so yeah, I'm still a little bit burnt out from all the classics I was reading, and I've definitely gotten into more contemporary works since then. Looking at this shelf here, we do have a couple Barnes & Noble classics on here, as well as kind of all those history books that I mentioned previously. We do have a couple books on this shelf that we picked up last year, as I mentioned, so I am going to pull a couple of those down. This is actually the book that my husband is currently reading, This Is How You Lose the Time War. He's about halfway through, and he's been reading it for a couple months, but he's really enjoying it. So I actually might add this to my physical TBR because he does recommend it, and it's under 200 pages. It's like 198 pages. So I feel like this could easily be like a one day read, 1 week read, kind of depending. But yeah, I think I would enjoy reading this book this year. So yeah, I am going to pull that one down. I did start The Afterlife of Mal Caldera, I believe is how you say it, by Nati Reed Perez. I think I got 28 pages in, and I was just in a massive reading slump. There's about 3 books on the shelf that I started last year, and one of them I think I got 60 pages in, and I just could not do it. Yeah, it's actually right here. So Once and Future Witches. I actually don't know if I even have it marked. Yeah, I got 81 pages into this book. And it's not that it wasn't good, it's just that I was in such a massive slump that I just could not get through anything. So the Once and Future Witches and The Afterlife of Mal Caldera were books that I had began reading last year, just unfortunately could not get into, but we'll see if I get to them this year. I'm not super sure if I'm gonna put them on my TBR for this year yet, just because I don't know. I think it needs to like call to me. I'm very much a mood reader, if you haven't maybe picked up on that so far. We do also have Wayward by Amelia Hart. I think this is a stunning cover, and this might be something that I add to my kind of fall TBR this year. We'll set it down. Ooh, this is another book that I began reading this year, or this past year. It's 2026. This is a book that I was reading in 2025. I got about 27 pages in, Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'm not so sure if I'm gonna put that on my TBR this year. I was enjoying it for sure. I definitely think it is a little bit slower pace. Like I said, I'm only about 26 pages into this, so I don't know. Should I give it another shot? I don't know. We'll put it off to the side for now. One book that I know I am going to add to my 2026 TBR is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. I have heard phenomenal things about this, and I would love to start reading this maybe around September, later October kind of times. I really wanted to get to this last year, and I just never did with wedding planning, so I do think that this is for sure going to be on the 2026 TBR. All right, next we have A Harvest of Hearts by Andrea Eames. I'm gonna pull this down. My husband and I actually picked this book out together. It seemed really intriguing at the time, so maybe we'll set this one down as well. It kind of sticking with that more like gothic fall autumnal vibe. We have Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. I believe I'm saying that correctly. So we might pull this one down for the fall as well. All right, next we have our top 2 shelves to go through. I believe I have actually read every book on this shelf, maybe give or take. And there's a couple that I know for sure I want to pull. We have this whole stack actually here of books that I got either last month or the month before, kind of the holidays, like my birthday time. So I'm definitely gonna pull all 3 of these, and we will go through all of these together as well. And then for all of our books up here, we have a couple more classics. We have a lot of Charles Dickens books. I do have a Taylor Jenkins Reid book I haven't read yet that I picked up last year. Maybe we'll pick this one for the summertime. We'll set it off to the side. Okay, I do also have a Mitch Albom book that I picked up last year. And he's one of my favorite authors. If you can't tell, this whole section here is just Mitch Albom. I just find his writing so captivating. So I definitely feel like I have to put this book on the 2026 TBR. I do also have 2 more books left in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. Before We Say Goodbye is the 4th book in this series. So I think I'm going to pull this one down for sure to get to, because they are shorter novels. They're about 200-ish pages, so I can definitely pull this down. And lastly, I had picked up some books on my birthday that were a little bit more educational from this used bookstore in the town that I live in. I'm actually currently reading one more kind of educational book at the moment, and I did finish this book recently at the end of 2025. This was the last book that I read of the year, You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. I thought this was phenomenal, so that one is finished. However, we do have a Biased and The Social Animal. Both of these books look incredible, honestly, but Biased has really been catching my eye. So I definitely think this one needs to be on the 2026 TBR. And then I'm probably not going to put The Social Animal on my 2026 TBR. If I get to it, that's awesome. But if I don't, that's totally fine. It's just a book that I would eventually like to get to. It's a little bit thicker. But yeah, just a super fascinating book, I think, just by what I've read on the back. Oh, I did almost forget this one. I got the 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston last year because this is one of the YouTubers that I watch, one of her favorite books. So I picked it up because honestly, I've heard such good reviews about this, and I think this would be a really easy maybe summer or spring read. So this is definitely going to go on the TBR. I did pull a couple of books from our bookshelf. I think we have a pretty good stack. So I will grab those, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about why I chose those books and kind of my plans, maybe my tentative timeline for that as well. I remember when I said that I had a very realistic and modest TBR. Maybe it was a little bit more unrealistic than I thought. I have way more books on my bookshelf than I thought I did, and I bought so many books last year. So we're currently looking at my 2026 physical TBR. Let's talk about it. So I did go ahead and rearrange all my books by maybe kind of when I want to read them, kind of starting from the top of the year, going down to kind of fall, winter time. But first, I wanted to talk about the book that I have finished this year and the book that I'm currently reading. So the book that I finished this year is Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambao. Hopefully I am saying this correctly. This is about a woman who owns a pawn shop, and this man comes to her front door, not someone who's kind of coming to trade a choice, but rather to kind of help her, and they end up going on this crazy journey together. All of the kind of world that they're exploring together and the decisions that have to be made is so picturesque and so otherworldly. There is a part of this book that I had tabbed actually that talks about kind of Studio Ghibli and kind of the world in that, and it kind of reminded me of that because some of these ideas are so out there, but I could still visualize them so well just by how well this author described them. It wasn't a 5-star book, but it was still a really, really fun journey to go on and a really good way to kick off the year, honestly. The next book that I'm reading is The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. This has been on my TBR forever, but I finally bought a copy of this last year, and I'm so happy that I did. If you know me personally, you know that I am applying to grad school, and let's just say that the course of study that I'm going on is very much related to this, and this is actually a required reading in one of the programs that I am applying for, and I've honestly just wanted to read this for so long. It's essentially just about how trauma can elicit a mental and physiological response, and just kind of how it really deeply affects the body, and kind of the research that we've gotten over the years, and what are some things we can kind of do to combat some of the unknowns, essentially. I'm honestly finding it super informative so far. I'm only about 34 pages in, and it's about 360 pages in here outside of kind of all of the references in the back. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really, really good book to set me up. Definitely a little bit slow of a read because there's so much information in here, but I am glad that I'm finally getting to this book this year. All right, so to finally get into my 2026 physical TBR, we do have Before We Say Goodbye by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, I believe is how you say that. This is the 4th book in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. If you don't know what the series is, it's essentially about a cafe where patrons can come in, sit in a very specific chair once this ghost leaves the seat, and then they can either visit the past or the future, but they only have as much time before their coffee gets cold to visit with someone. And they also cannot leave the seat that they are occupying. That's definitely not spoiling anything. That's definitely the entire premise of all of these books. However, it's usually split into like 4 parts, and it follows like a different person each time, but there is also like central characters in the story. So I'm really interested to see kind of how they play a role in this book and kind of the journeys that will go on in this 4th one. Next we have Biased by Dr. Jennifer L. Eberhardt, I believe is how you say her last name. I picked this book up at a local bookstore on my birthday this past year, actually. It was really eye-catching for me because the title is Biased, Uncovering the Hidden Prejudice That Shapes What We See, Think, and Do. And on the inside flap here, it says, you don't have to be racist to be biased. Like, that's the very first sentence. And then it talks about kind of unconscious bias and, you know, this woman's research on how it's taken place in courtrooms, boardrooms, prisons, street, classrooms, coffee shops, personal experiences, and how she has helped companies and just kind of day-to-day people uncover unconscious bias, and how we can all kind of work better to understand the consequences of prejudice, bias, discrimination, etc. And I definitely think that this book is also going to help set me up for becoming a better therapist in the future. So I'm super interested to read this and kind of hear some more personal accounts and really delve into the research on unconscious bias. And yeah, I don't know. I'm super fascinated to read this, and I do think that I'm going to read this book in February during Black History Month. I just find that to be a really fitting time of the year to read it. So yeah, this is definitely on my 2026 TBR. All right, to completely pivot, I also have Heather Fawcett's Emily Wilde Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is a stunning cover, and you cannot tell me otherwise. Like, this is so gorgeous. I actually think that this author has multiple other books in this. Maybe it's like a series, I believe. But I think this is essentially about a professor who journeys into a small town to study fairy folklore and discovers dark fae magic, friendship, and love in the start of a heartwarming and enchanting new fantasy series. I'm super interested to see kind of what journey the professor in this book goes on and what kind of a journey I'm gonna go on when I read this. So yeah, I have this on my kind of more like spring TBR, kind of like that mindset, just kind of with the graphics on the front, and I'm super interested to finally delve into this. All right, for no particular reason, this is going on my spring TBR simply just because I want to get to this sooner rather than later. This is A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Leong. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. This is essentially about a woman whose beauty is seen as a blessing to the villagers of Yu, convinced that the best fate for a girl is to marry well and support her family. So when Zishi, hopefully I'm saying that correct, draws the attention of the famous young military advisor family, he presents her with a rare opportunity to use her beauty as a weapon, one that could topple the rival neighboring kingdom of Wu, improve the lives of her people, and avenge her sister's murder. All she has to do is infiltrate the enemy palace as a spy, seduce their immoral king, and weaken them from within. Once inside the enemy palace, Jishi finds herself under the hungry gaze of the king's advisors, while the king himself shows her great affection. Despite his gentleness, a brutality lurks, and Jishi knows that she can never let her guard down. But the higher she climbs in the Wu court, the further she and family have to fall. And if she is unmasked as a traitor, she will bring both kingdoms down. I just find this so fascinating, and the cover of this is stunning. I actually read a book that I feel like is very similar to this description last year. I read The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, where it's also kind of like the woman, like her duty is to marry, and like it's usually like the most beautiful woman, and how beauty can actually be like a deadly thing. So I'm super interested to see where this story goes. And then next we have One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I really love this author's writing. I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, like everybody else and their dog, in like 2022, I think. And I really enjoyed that book. And then I also read After I Do last January. It was the first book I read last year, actually. I think I had given it 5 stars originally, and like looking back on it now, I'd probably give it a 3-star, but you know, if I could go back and re-rate everything, like I'm sure everything would be different, because the more you read, the more you learn, the more knowledge you gain. This story, from what I know, is essentially about these 2 high school sweethearts, and the husband goes missing, and a couple years go by, and the woman remarries, or she's engaged, but then her husband, who she presumed was dead, basically comes back, shows back up in her life, and now she's kind of torn between the fiance that she's come to love and then her husband, who she thought was dead. I think it's just really interesting to kind of imagine that scenario and truly like, what would someone do? Because you have all of your past and all of this love and all of this grief that you're processing, and then you're trying to rewrite your story, and you find love and you're finding comfort and security again, and then to kind of have that, the rug swept under you. Yeah, I'm super interested to see where this story will go. And the next book that I have on my TBR is The Last Dragon of the East by Katrina Kwan. The cover of this reminded me so much, again, of The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, that I truly thought it was the same author because the artwork is so similar. As you can see, there is kind of the red string of fate on this cover as there was on The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. And I don't even think it's the same illustrator, which is crazy. But yeah, anyway, beautiful cover. But on the back of this book, it describes, inspired by the Chinese myths of ancient dragon gods and threads of fate, Katrina Kwan's dazzling fantasy debut is a propulsive adventure perfect for fans of Su Lin Tan and Hannah Witten. It also describes, at the spry young age of 25, Sai has led a quiet life, barely keeping the family tea house up and running while taking care of his ailing mother. But he's parlayed a not-so-secret gift into a side career. He can see the red threads of fate between soulmates, which lends itself nicely to matchmaking. Sai has never tried to follow his own thread, which is gray and fraying. Sai's ordinary experience is about to be turned upside down. When his mother's doctor sells him a pair of dragon scales, claiming they're a miracle cure, Sai is pretty sure he's being scammed. When the medicine actually works, Sai finds himself forced by his ruthless emperor into the search for a dragon thought long extinct. Thrown into the heart of a brewing war, he must face down terrifying challenges, both magic and mortal, and for the first time he may discover who's at the end of his thread of fate. Yeah, I'm super interested in this myth of the red string of fate, and that soulmates can be tied together through a string. I just find that so fascinating, and especially if there's dragons in a book. I mean, come on, I have to read it, obviously. So yeah, I'm super excited to get into this one, and I do feel like this will also be a pretty quick read as well. Alright, as you saw, I am a pretty big fan of Mitch Albom. I just find his work so captivating. It just really makes you think, and there's usually a lesson to be had at the end of all of his works. So this is Twice by Mitch Albom. I think it came out in 2024, if I'm not mistaken. This edition is 2025, and it does say first edition. So I think this just came out last year. And this book is essentially about second chances and the consequences that can come with having second chances. And it's about an 8-year-old boy, actually. But really, I find the last paragraph on the inside of this flap to really encapsulate Mitch Albom's writing. It says, "In Twice, America's favorite storyteller, Mitch Albom, is at the height of his powers. A love story that is enchanting, probing, and clairvoyant in matters of the heart. Twice will make you smile, weep, think about your own second chances, and overflow with love from beginning to end." I think this is going to be a really quick and really powerful read, honestly. Super interested to read another one of this author's works. Next, we have The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is one of my favorite YouTubers' favorite books, so I just knew that I had to eventually pick this up, and I think it's going to be a really good summer read. It's just really bright and colorful, and I think it will be a really good beach read, even though I am surrounded by cornfields. So I actually don't know if this is going to be happening on near any beaches, maybe a lake, who knows. But this is, from what I know, this is about a woman who suddenly there's a man who appears in her kitchen, but he is 7 years in her past and she is 7 years in his future. The story kind of blends the past, present, and future, and especially on love, I believe, where this woman thinks maybe she's 7 years too late to go on this journey. So I'm super interested because it is pretty vague. Like, we have someone who's 7 years in the past and someone who's 7 years in the future. Like, how is this happening? How is this gonna work out? I'm just super interested to see where this is gonna go. This will actually be my first Ashley Poston read as well, so I'm super interested to see what her writing style is like. The next couple books that I have 4 books, and these are all going to be on my fall TBR because I simply must have the 4th of the books that I have to be for fall time because that's peak reading time. But if I do end up in grad school, I'm not entirely sure if I'll be able to get to all of these books, but I am putting them on the TBR because I would still love to get to these. The first book that we have is Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright, and from what I know, this is kind of more of like a gothic story. Let's see, it says, "Dark, sexy, and twisty. This book will seize you by the throat and hold your attention to the very end." My husband actually picked up this book when we went book shopping last fall, and honestly it kind of piqued both of our interests. It says, "A villainous heroine finds herself plunged into a seductive world of power, politics, and murder in the court of the Vampire King in this bloodthirsty debut from an unmissable new voice in fantasy romance." The cover of it is absolutely stunning. It's absolutely stunning. I don't know, kind of sounds like a spooky good time, so that's definitely gonna go on the TBR. Right, the next book that we have is A Harvest of Hearts by Andrea Eames. I don't know how this is showing up on camera, but it's kind of fun. When it's in the light, it's a little bit more of a pink cover, but when it's in the dark, it's a little bit more of a red cover, which I find so fascinating. Yeah, I don't know. If you ever get your hands on a copy of this, it's stunning. It also has really cool sprayed edges, which normally I don't love, but these are fun. And I think both my husband and I picked this book up last autumn because at the beginning it says, "In the beloved tradition of Howl's Moving Castle, a whimsical and unforgettable story of fantastic adventure, common sense, and the power of love to overcome the greatest obstacles." We both love Howl's Moving Castle. We actually just did a rewatch very recently, so it's just always on the mind, you know? We love Calcifer, we love the story, the art in the movie. We're just a big fan of Studio Ghibli in general, so yeah, I'm super interested to see what this whole book will be like. To describe it further, it says that everyone in Foss Butcher's village knows what happens when the magic workers come. They harvest human hearts to use in their spells. That's just how life in her kingdom works. But Foss, plain, clumsy, and practical as a boot, never expected anyone would want hers. When a sorceress snags a piece of Foss's heart without meaning to, she is furious. For once a heart is snagged, the experience is, well, unpleasant. So Foss finds herself stomping toward the grand city to keep his enchanted house and demands that he fixes her before he keels over and dies, or whatever happens when hearts were snagged. It does go a little bit further, but I will stop it there to kind of keep the suspense for myself and for anybody who may be watching this as well. But yeah, essentially someone who is getting a taste of her own medicine. This also sounds a little bit spooky. I feel like this would be a good September read, honestly, to kind of get into the spooky season mood, so super interested in this. Next, we have a book that I have been wanting to read for a really long time because I keep hearing really, really good reviews about it, and I believe it's part of an interconnected standalone series with 2 books, or maybe it's a series and it's a duology. So I'm not really sure, but we have Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. I think the cover on this is so cool and so pretty. But I think this is essentially about these like games called Phantasma, so I think it's really high stakes is what I've heard. Phantasma is a cursed manor full of twisting corridors and lavish ballrooms, staffed by enticing demons and fatal temptations, and Ophelia must conquer all 9 floors to succeed if her fears don't undertake her first. I believe there may also be a little bit of romance in this from kind of what I am reading, and I love a little kind of family saving aspects, a sister saving a sister. It's just always gonna eat. You do everything for family and you fall in love. Oh my god, it's so good. I love it. So yeah, I'm really excited to get to this book. Hopefully maybe in October or November this year. I feel like this would definitely be a really good read. The second to last book that I have on my TBR is Wayward by Amelia Hart. I've heard good reviews, maybe mixed reviews about this book, I believe. I just honestly think that this is one of the most stunning covers of a book that I've ever seen. I think it's so gorgeous. And from what I know about Wayward, it follows 3 women in 3 different time frames. So we have 2019, 1619, and 1942, and it's kind of weaving together the stories of these extraordinary women across 5 centuries. Wayward is an enthralling novel of female resilience and transformative power of the natural world. So yeah, I just find this extremely interesting. And the front of this cover says, "They call us witches, we call ourselves wayward." And the last book that I have on my 2026 TBR is a book that my husband is actually currently reading. He's about halfway through, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone. It's a fairly short novel, and it's a little bit dystopian if I'm not mistaken. It says, "In the ashes of a dying world, Red finds a letter marked burn before reading. So begins an unlikely correspondence between 2 rival agents in a war that stretches through the vast reaches of time and space. Red belongs to the agency, a post-singularity technocopia. Blue belongs to Garden, a single vast consciousness embedded in all organic matter. Their pasts are bloody and their futures mutually exclusive. They have nothing in common, say that they're the best, and they're alone. Now, what began as a battlefield of boast grows into a dangerous game, one both red and blue are determined to win. Because winning's what you do in war, isn't it? A tour de force collaboration from 2 powerhouse writers that spans the whole of time and space." Oh, I didn't even realize that this is 2 authors. We have Amal El-Motar, hopefully I'm saying correctly, and Max Gladstone. I didn't even realize that. We have the kind of red and the blue contrast. This book is also labeled seditious and seductive, which I find so interesting, so fascinating. I think this will be a pretty quick read. The font in here is fairly big, and I believe it has fairly short chapters, so I think this will be a pretty quick read. I'll wait till my husband is finished reading that, and then I'm not sure when I'm gonna read this. I know I just kind of went throughout the year, but I think whenever he's finished, so maybe in like the summertime, he takes a couple months to read, I think that I will get to this. I just want to say thank you so much if you stuck around this whole video and for kind of joining me in establishing my 2026 TBR. Next, I want to put together my 2026 reading journal. I'm just waiting for a little bit more bits and bobs to kind of put that together, but I would also like to film that so I can kind of show you my process of doing that, and then we can add those books in there together. I'm wishing you a restful and warm beginning of the new year, and wishing you a year full of great books and great memories. Thank you so much for watching.